Welcome back to Choosers of the Slain. My name is Lucas,
And I'm Nate.
and we're here for episode 10, trying to make good on our promise to get you more content more often. We had a big kind of some big news from Games Workshop in the last couple weeks here with a big FAQ update that changed some point values. It changed a lot of basic game rules. So we kind of wanted to open up today, just jumping right into it and talking about our three favorite changes. A lot of other podcasts and articles and things have kind of talked to death the tactical implications and all of the various changes. So we figured we'd just hammer down the things that we liked the most to kind of just get that conversation going. So Nate, what were your
Yeah,
favorite or at least most interesting changes?
sure. So, on a purely selfish note, uh, I guess I shouldn't say purely, but a lot of it's a selfish note. I like that the Necron Canoptic Reanimator got a significant decrease in point cost. It needed it really badly. It's a really flavorful unit for the Necrons. It's one of their new units, obviously. A lot of people have them because of the Indomitus boxes.
Hmm.
And at 110 points, they were pretty much a garbage pick. There was just no reason to take them. At 80 points, I don't know that they're I don't know that they're a top tier pick by any means. They're not an auto include. I don't even know that they're really competitive. It's kind of tough for me to say at this point, but they at least are worth looking at now. So I think if you're willing to work around that in your list, you can probably make them work with a little more confidence than when they were 30 points more expensive.
Well, that makes sense, especially considering nobody is going to try to crack the code to figure out how to effectively use them if they're so expensive that it's like a death sentence to put them in.
Right.
But if they're more affordable, then people might experiment with them to find out whether or not they're good.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the other one, I can't say it's one of my favorites, but it's one that I think adds a really interesting aspect to the game, and one that I want to see how it plays out over my next few games in particular, and how it might affect some of the tournament scene and everything. But that's the change to the grand tournament rules, and how the winner of the roll off at the beginning of the game has to go first. You no longer get the choice.
Okay.
I
Yeah, I
think
think
that changes your tactics and deployment a lot.
yeah, it introduces that random factor back where
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of plan for it, but you might get kind of screwed over by the dice there.
Yeah. It's reminiscent a little bit of how the initiative system works in Age of Sigmar, except it's not every turn it's swinging. It's just you can't count on going first or second anymore.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that's good.
that's a nice change. And then the last thing's not a change so much as a clarification they did that I thought they did really well. And that was clarifying how coming in from reinforcements via some sort of deep strike or teleport mechanic works with units that are at different elevations, whether that's in buildings or whether that's on hills or whatever that might be. Um, Not just in terms of this is the distance that you can come in and here's how a triangle works, but also because of the way the 5-inch vertical combat range works, that you might come in and only need to make a 4-inch charge just
Hmm.
because of where the unit placement is. And it was nice to see that not only did they explicitly say, yes, this is intended, this is how it's going to work, here's a detailed description of why it works this way and how it works this way, but also here's a diagram just in case you were curious. And I thought that was a really nice thing to see. We're used to seeing a lot of diagrams and stuff from Games Workshop, but frankly, sometimes they're not all that helpful, and
Yeah.
in some cases, wind up making things even muddier. But
Yeah.
this
I'm
one and the explanation was pretty tight and pretty well done. So I'm excited to see that they've kind of taken a stance of we're going to make sure that the rules that we're putting out and the rules we're updating are clear, and if they're not clear, we're going to make them clear.
well, and it's also nice to see them like I don't want to say like double down, but they published that rule the way they published it. And in the past, we've seen things where if maybe it was written not the way they intended, or if something happened that they didn't expect, they would just edit the rule, and it felt very swingy. And
Yeah.
so it felt like every time there was some type of FAQ or errata that like the core game mechanics were changing. So to see them actually go, no, that's what we intended. Like we knew it said that, and the people who read it, technically were correct. To see that was neat, because it isn't what we've seen in the past. And diagram wise, I have to say we're looking at you 3rd through 5th edition, where like 90% of the diagrams made the arguments worse instead of helping.
Yeah, I remember when I started in 5th edition, there were a few games where I would go, okay, so then we do this. Somebody would go, no, that's not how it works. And I'd go, but the rule says this. And they'd go, yeah, but look at the picture. Great. So which one do we use? Because they're practically opposites.
I have never had so many rules arguments in my like wargaming life than in 3rd edition, when you compared the fallback corridor rules to the orcs' ability to run towards each other's units.
Okay.
Because everybody thought, no, they just shift to one side inside the fallback corridor, and it's like, no, they draw their fallback corridor, instead of to the edge of the table, they draw it to the other unit. And every time GW put out a picture to explain it, the example that they cooked up made it look like they were falling back towards the table edge, because they didn't think, no, we need to see like a 40-degree angle here so that people will stop arguing. It was, oh my God, it was the worst. Like there was like 6 or 8 months of, I don't even want to play this game right now.
Yeah.
It was bad.
So what about you? What we've talked about what I like, but what did you take away from it?
Well, I think, kind of speaking of implications and rules and how they do things, one of the things I really liked was the update to apothecaries being able to bring the invader ATVs back to life. That was a pretty controversial thing. And while yes, definitely the apothecary needed to be changed so that it couldn't bring what was basically a vehicle back to life.
You mean the Narthesium doesn't work on a quad?
Yeah, they're not tech marines.
That makes sense.
But so I'm glad the change happened. But the thing that made me so excited for it was not that they changed it; it was how they changed it. In so many previous editions of the game, we would see they would completely rewrite an ability or completely change a rule when a conflict like that would arise. I'm thinking, for example, the whole commissar conscripts interaction in early 8th edition, where because people were abusing the relationship between commissars and conscripts, they rewrote the commissar's special ability instead of just giving the conscripts a single sentence that said commissars can't do that to this unit.
Yeah.
Or the 4+ chance they have of not listening to an order, just apply that to the commissar's rule, which would have been a much more elegant solution. But instead they rewrote the whole commissar ability, and then commissars didn't see play because they were garbage then. And I was so excited to see that literally all they did was just add the little bit to the ability that says excluding invader ATVs. And it was just so simple. It's the whole Occam's razor thing. I was very happy about that. My second pick for this topic is going to be the changes to the secondary objective, bring it down, in the Grand Tournament book.
Yeah, those were interesting.
Yeah. The way it was originally written, any vehicle paid out the same value. And so if somebody blew up a repulsor executioner or an Imperial Knight, they got the same amount of points as they would get for killing a single penitent engine out of a squad. Now, maybe I feel a little salty about that as a Sisters player, because mortifiers are so good. But it really kind of felt like if you sat down, if you brought like a unit of land speeders or a unit of penitent engines or mortifiers, or even like a Tyranid player sitting down with, if they have any, I'm trying to remember if in the current edition they have any like groups of monster keywords.
I think Venomthropes and Zoanthropes, if I remember correctly.
Yep. If they have it, cool. If not, it still works as an example
Right.
of, where if you show up with one of those units, your opponent just goes, I'm going to choose bring it down. And
Yeah.
you've guaranteed them 15 secondary points because all they've got to do is kill what is tantrum out to a pretty good infantry squad.
Hmm.
Because you look at mortifiers, for instance, for the sisters, or
Oh yeah.
five toughness, 5 wounds. They have saves, but they're not great saves. And somebody could get paid those victory points. And the change to bring it down tied it to how many wounds the vehicle has. And I think that it's nice because if I show up with mortifiers, I might still give away victory points, but I'm
Hmm.
not guaranteeing them maxing out their secondary because of one unit in my army.
Right. Right.
So I like that. Now, still on the sisters train, my third pick, and
Yeah.
this is one that I have been crowing about for a while. Repentia were too good.
Yeah.
They were too cheap. They were too good. And they in ninth edition they upped the price a little bit,
Hmm.
but it
Hmm.
was just shy. I've been saying for a while I wanted one more point or possibly 2 more points. Was kind
Yeah.
of on the fence, but one more point solidly, and we saw exactly that. I could not be more happy with that. As somebody who regularly uses this particular cudgel on my opponents, it didn't feel great to put my Repentia on the table and have the opponent like watch like a pint of oxygen just leave their lungs.
Right. Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
And I mean, and we've talked about that on this show multiple times that,
yeah,
Repentia are just too good and there's not enough to distinguish them from the other choices that fit
yeah.
that role in the Sisters Army.
Yep. And the Sisters Army is character driven enough. And
Hmm.
because the major changes they did to bring Repentia into line were not actually the increase of the Repentia's cost, they were the increase of the cost of the support characters.
Yeah.
And so these two things in conjunction, I think, is really going to help, because even though it's only 1 point, and people might be like, well, it's 1 point. Well, a really a really melee centric Bloody Rose army is going to have somewhere between 21 and 20, eh, probably 21 at minimum, but possibly maxing them out to the full, what is it, 27
Yeah.
Repentia. And so that extra 21 to 27 points could mean the difference between bringing one of those characters or not.
Right.
And so that it does add up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I was very happy to see that. I felt like they had their finger on the pulse of that. So
Yeah.
those are my three. Um, and I'm sure that there's we're gonna get off the air and we're gonna be like, oh, I should have picked this or I should have picked that, because there were so
Right.
many great changes.
There were.
Um, but
Absolutely.
uh, but those are the ones that we wanted to highlight because those are the things that stuck out to us. And I think that kind of, talking about, transparency with rules, talking about like things being more clear, it kind of segues into the next thing we wanted to talk about this episode, which there was an amazing interview with one of GW's authors that Goonhammer recently did. I'll let Nate talk about the article here, but there's some clarity that came from one of those questions that I think is just as important as some of this rules stuff we were just talking about. So you want to tell us about the article, Nate?
Yeah, yeah. So the article was actually posted back beginning of July, but I know I didn't see it coming out in a lot of channels, so I don't know if it
Mhm.
just didn't get the attention or if it was one of those things where a lot of people went, it's a Black Library interview, so there's not much to it. I don't know, but there were a bunch of questions, a lot of good stuff in there. We'll have the article link in the description so you can check it out. But the one that really stuck out to both of us and got us talking about how it affects our hobby side of things was the 17th question, which was totally a selfish question to ask here, but do you have any quick words of advice or words of wisdom for people cooking up their own chapters or chaos warbands at home? And Aaron Dembski Bowden's answer to that was enlightening, to say the least. But what were your
Oh,
thoughts on that?
oh, absolutely. I think that the biggest thing about it is, when for those of us who we may play the game competitively, or we may be interested in, the hobby or the art side of it. But for those of us who also want to make sure that the stuff that we do is also immersive and fits the narrative, and, for those of us that have that kind of like role player inside that want to make sure that stuff makes sense. Um, a lot of times the information on how successor chapters worked or how chaos warbands worked was always coming from these like abbreviated in narrative pseudo descriptions from the codexes where they're giving, they're just shotgunning out a ton of information to make sure that you can get excited about the IP and for you to like kind of roughly understand how things work. And then they encourage you, make up your own armies and come up with your own ideas. And then when you reference back to that material, there's no like real good concrete information on how it works. And so you, as somebody who cares about the narrative part of it, you're like, well, I want to make a successor chapter that does this, that, or the other, but I'm not really sure like how, how long is librarian training? How long, when they send tech adepts to Mars to learn how to be tech marines, how long are they gone? When they come back, yeah, I guess they're kind of loyal to Mars, but they're also loyal to the chapter. But like,
Mm-hmm.
how does that play out with this, that, or the other? There's just there's a lot of like areas that are important to those of us who like the narrative that don't get discussed because it's not like a writer sitting down and explaining to you in conversational tone.
Right.
Um, this is how it works, man. And this answer, this one thing that just stood out to both of us in this article is Mr. Dembski Bowden just basically says exactly that. He's like, all right, man, this is how it works. And he spells it out. So he really hammers like, when you're coming up with a successor chapter, you want to make sure that you're unique, but not better.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like this Mary Sue thing of, come up with your story to your guys are the best at jungle fighting or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just, give them enough to make them interesting. And it doesn't really matter what your gene seed is. It doesn't really matter like what your chapter's heritage is, because from an in setting perspective, the Marines themselves largely are not so married to that. Like unless the individual Marine or unless the culture of the chapter is written to be like really into its heritage, it really doesn't matter that much. And so he just kind of breaks down the 2/3 of chapters that are out there have Ultramarines gene seed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
one of the quotes that he says that I absolutely adored was, the Ultramarines get a lot of hate. They're the poster boys. They're everybody likes to hate on them because they're the cool kid or whatever.
Right.
And like just the fact that he just says it's stable gene seed. That's it. That's all. It doesn't mean that 2/3 of the chapters are basically just Ultramarines. It doesn't matter that 2/3 of the chapter think the Ultramarines are that great. It's just, so you got the gene seed, whatever. And then he says, if you like Space Marines, you like Ultramarine gene seed.
Yeah.
I love that.
And yeah, I mean, to a large extent, that is how it works. Like, sure, Ultramarines get a bad rap and everything, but in lore, a lot of Space Marines are descended from the Ultramarine Legion.
Yeah.
It's like he says, it's stable gene seed. They don't have any crazy flaws. They don't have black rage. They don't have turning into werewolves.
Yep. Well, here's the other part. This is the thing that I absolutely loved because as a friendly local game store owner, watching the fights that break out about lore and stuff is sometimes it's entertaining, but sometimes it's not. But I love this particular quote. The flip side of the coin, by the way, is that using trait or gene seed is not as big of a deal as the characters in the universe think it is. The Imperium is scared that it's a big deal, but the Imperium is as an ignorant, tyrannical, fascist theocracy that prays to machines and purges its own history for fear of actual monsters that pop out of reality behind their own universe.
Yep.
Some readers understandably assume too that when chapters go wrong, like in the Cursed Founding, that there's often a nudge and a wink towards, well, they use trait or gene seed. And he says maybe, but also not so much. This is the part I love.
Yes.
There are several chapters with trait or gene seed doing just fine, and no one knows they've got it.
Yep.
And so the fact that it's somebody just saying, and not that we actually need this as hobbyists, because obviously we can do whatever we want, it's our game, but for those of us who do care about the narrative and want to do things right and don't like to name every Marine champion Jim Bob, the it does matter whether or not we're doing it correctly, because we love the hobby, we love the story, we want to make sure that our ideas fit within it.
Yep.
Kind of a, nobody wants to be accused of writing fan fiction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And so for them, for somebody who is in the know and somebody who has been trusted to, weave a narrative from their IP, to just say, like, straight up, yes, loyalist legions have traitor gene seed, let it go.
Yeah.
That is so, it is like, from a writing standpoint, it's kind of freeing to be able to be like, cool, well, now I can
Hmm.
just make up what I want for my chapter, and I don't have to feel like, am I doing this wrong? And not, that doesn't necessarily matter to every player, but it
Right.
matters to some of us.
Right.
Especially those of us, like I personally, I'm very open about it. I struggle with obsessive compulsive disorder. So having, having this type of conversational information about the IP for how it relates to me creating my own successor chapters is actually a bit mentally freeing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because I don't have to sit here going like, but I didn't do it right.
Yeah.
Um,
Which, speaking of our own successor chapters, you've been working on one lately,
I have.
and have had some interesting results with how you've been painting them and everything.
I have. So along the lines of talking about marine chapters, the I'm working on a successor chapter that I call the Immortal Lions. It's a nod to a video game that I play, kind of a wanting to marry, two of my loves together, where it's not so much me just inserting the video game into 40K, but it's kind of just taking a like a color scheme and maybe some like cultural nods from that, so that it just kind of is a more fulfilling project for me from an art standpoint. And so the color palette that I'm using is designed to match the uniform of this organization from the game. And I was really struggling with how I was going to get the blues that I wanted, and how I wanted to, as I've said in previous episodes, I really like kind of like a dirty weathered look. But I also don't like the chalky dustiness that comes from just heavily dry brushing things. And especially even if you're not necessarily always dry brushing, but when you do a lot of heavy weathering, there's things can get kind of cloudy and muddy.
Yeah.
And I came across a kind of a dry brushing method by a company called Artis Opus, where they sell a product that they call the dampening pad, which is essentially like a little kind of half shot glass that you have a piece of foam in, and you
Mm.
you you get that foam wet, and as you're dry brushing, you keep hitting the brush to this dampening pad to keep just enough moisture in your brush, that while you're using dry brush techniques and you're using the level of paint in the brush that you would use dry brushing, it comes it comes out more like overbrushing, which is a technique that some of you might be familiar with, which is essentially like wet dry brushing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It that methodology kind of like bridges those two concepts. So you're getting to do like a creamier, more damp dry brushing method to avoid the chalkiness and the dustiness, but you're not like slopping on paint like you do when you overbrush. And I'm very pleased with kind of how the coverage works on it. And since I'm only doing this chapter up to a, like, I guess what you call like a tabletop plus, or a battle ready plus kind of level, um trying out a new technique that's essentially like a better, cleaner method that is as fast as dry brushing is super intriguing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to get some more pictures taken of the stuff I'm working on, so that we can get them up on Discord, or I don't know if we'll be able to get them on the video here or not, but I want to get some of those pictures out, kind of show people the I don't know, it's a neat effect.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Really
like
neat
the way it
product.
looks. There,
So
there's
if
kind
you're
of a
interested, oh, go ahead.
there's kind of a stippling element to it too, isn't there?
There is, yeah. If you use entirely their method, which you can find, they have a YouTube channel,
Hmm.
Artis Opus. It's like artist without the T at the end, and then opus, like magnum opus. They have a YouTube channel, and we can put a link in the description or on Discord for it too, where they have like 101 tutorial videos for their method. They sell like a line of dry brushes that are designed. It's called the Series D.
Hmm.
That's designed for this method, but you can recreate this method with standard, synthetic brushes or sable hair brushes that you might already have. They're just not from personal tests. They're just not as good at it.
Yeah, you
Um,
don't want to use sables for that. You'll ruin your brush on top of
yeah.
having trouble getting the results you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I did. I was given as a Christmas gift this Series D brushes because I had expressed interest in this method, and while I was waiting for them to come, I took some of my old synthetic brushes and tried to replicate the method with other equipment. But I did all the things that they do in the method,
Yeah.
but just with different equipment, and it worked. I mean, you can do it
Yeah.
without their brushes, but I'll be honest with you, it it the test model I used was a Space Marine Impulsor, the El Camino, and the time it took me to do one side of it with my own brushes replicating their method,
Hmm.
I did the rest of the impulsor with their brushes, and
Yeah.
it looks like it matches. Like, I was able to do it okay with my stuff, but it just took so much longer and it was so much less efficient. Um, so definitely check them out. Series D by Artis Opus. Check out their videos. I'd love to talk with you on Discord about it. Whatever. I am a believer.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything turns out really well, and it's interesting that looking at the Series D, the largest of them looks a lot like a makeup brush.
Yeah,
And I think that's probably part of the speed factors. Just they're a lot larger than the normal dry brushes you'd be using for miniatures.
yeah,
So I I like the way they've kind of gone about that and come up with this method and then really tailored a product to fit the method without
yeah,
making it so exclusive that there's no reason to have it otherwise. Or
yeah.
that you can only do it with their product. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, like you said, the results are good. I've been enjoying what I'm seeing so far.
Yeah, and I one thing I will, not to totally like harp on their product, but something I do like about it is I haven't used mine long enough to wear them or break them in yet.
Hmm.
But one of the things that was built into their design is how they're rounded. They're supposedly designed so that as they break in, the bristles turn in instead of turning out. Like
Oh.
when you use an old brush as a dry brush, it
Hmm.
eventually gets that like handlebar mustache curl on the edge as all the bristles kind of like break away.
Oh yes.
Supposedly how they have them glued into the ferrule, as they break, they curl in on themselves
Hmm.
to maintain, like, instead of it losing its round shape, it kind of switches to a more like eraser head shape,
Huh.
as it breaks in. Again, I don't have personal experience with it because I just got mine, but
Right.
that's supposedly one of the selling factors of their design.
I'd be really interested to see that. I that is an interesting feature. I'm curious to see what your results are there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's the project I'm working on, and the article that we were talking about, the interview, just really kind of gave me some piece about some of the choices I was making. Because I do write, like, I know what their homeworld is called, and I know what their
Oh yeah.
culture is, and I could sit down with somebody and explain what one of these Marines would be like to have, like, in a scene, in a in writing or in a book or
Hmm.
whatever. And so to have, like, some of the choices and some of the things I did when I wrote the backstory for my successor chapter, kind of validated by this notion that the gene seed matters less, and as long as it's about fun, then it's really not remembering that the assumptions we read in the fluff are not GW's prescription for how Marines are supposed to work. It's literally the beliefs of the characters that are talking.
Yeah.
And so for players to be able to see one of their writers say, it's okay, write whatever you want, because the assumptions that everybody is arguing with you about are literally the ignorant beliefs of those characters in the story, not the beliefs of Games Workshop about your choices.
Right. Right.
And it was so cool, and so I got even more excited about about my Marines, and I probably got more painting done in the 2 or 3 days after I found that interview than I had done in 3 or 4 weeks, because I was just like pumped to like, I'm gonna work on my Marines.
Yeah. And it's always great to kind of get that kickstart that you need.
Yeah, yeah. So what are you working on?
So right now I've been working on Necrons for a while. I finally got around to putting together stuff out of the Indomitus box and throwing some paint on them. Um, my my current my current painting project, or what's on my table right now, is old squad of 12 warriors and a unit of 5 immortals that I had at one point painted in a different color scheme, and just figured, well, might as well rescue those from the bin, and so that's kind of been what I've been working on there. But my plan is to get 1,000 points of Necrons painted, which I'm pretty close to now. And then after that, I'm not sure if I'm going to start working on my Drukhari or wait until that book comes out and just take a little bit of time to kind of play around with different styles and try some different techniques on one-off models, or models that I don't necessarily care so much about, or whatever might be the case. But I've been more and more lately finding that I'd like to go back and try playing around with non-metallic metals again. I've seen a couple painters now that have been able to circumvent my normal gripes about it, where it has too much of a cartoonish look unless you're looking at it from one specific angle.
Okay.
And I've seen a couple of painters now that do a really good job of controlling where the highlights and the shadows are without necessarily controlling where the viewpoint has to be on it.
Cool.
And so kind of want to just work on putting that skill in the tool belt and going from there. But that'll be once I'm done with another 9 bases of scarabs and a heavy destroyer, I think. So I don't know. It'll be a little bit still, but at the rate I'm
That's
going,
fair.
I figure a couple weeks and I'll be able to start working on something else.
Cool. I'm really excited to see what you do with that, because I tend to be in the, I don't want to say like anti non-metallic metal camp,
Mm-hmm.
but I tend to really dislike that particular issue of, they look great from one angle and the rest, it just looks weird from every other angle.
Yeah.
And so I tend to avoid non-metallic metals whenever possible for that reason. So I'm really excited to see kind of what you do with that.
Yeah.
What direction you take it.
And I think part of my reasoning for wanting to take a look at it again and really actually give it a try, because I haven't done anything with it since probably just a year or two into my quote unquote painting career. But the thing that's really kind of made me look more and more at it is my Necrons that I'm painting are almost all done in metallics. In fact, I think the only thing that's not a metallic base is the swords and the the war scythes and the energy tubes and all that. Those are like a magenta, but everything else, everything else is either straight up a metallic paint that then I go through and shade and wash and all that, or it's like a contrast paint sprayed over a series of metallic bases to get the highlights and everything there. And the thing that I'm noticing with that is there are a lot of instances where I would like the model to look one way, but because of the nature of metallic paints, painting it that way makes it look weird, because then you get like weird dual highlights in places and you wind up with reflections. One of the biggest things that has thrown me off in a few cases is I really like some of Vallejo's their metal color line. It's their designed to be airbrushed, uses actual aluminum pigment rather than mica, and is based almost entirely on like color matching standard airship or Air Force colors of various aircraft colors. And so one of theirs is called duraluminum, and it's not even the brightest silver that they have, but it is practically chrome.
Okay.
And with that, I wind up running into issues where some of my, whether it's Immortals or one of my Overlords or whatever, where I'm like, yeah, these guys have well taken care of equipment. They're not, they're not mindless zombies that just get the bottom of the barrel rusty junk. I find that with it being so reflective, it tends to pull shadows and highlights and reflections of color from all sorts of weird places. And all of a sudden I'm seeing like, I've got this shadow, but then right next to it is a reflection of the bluish tone that the other metal has, and that makes it look like even more of a shadow. And then all of a sudden it catches some gold, and that's a weird yellow highlight then, and then the light's hitting it, and it's practically blinding, and you just lose all the reading on the detail, even with washing and panel lining and everything there. So frustration there has made me go, yeah, maybe it's worth trying to look into controlling those highlights a little more and taking another look at that non-metallic style.
Yeah, that's fair. Especially if the alternative being to really mat it down with in like the varnishing step, and in which case,
why use metallics?
Yeah, exactly. If you're just going to take all the sheen off of it. So no, that's cool. I'm really curious about that. So, we're talking about, you're working on a bit of a small Necron force, and I was just talking about a new Space Marine successor chapter I'm starting. Well, that kind of brings us to the last thing that we wanted to talk about this episode. Was we had put out last episode kind of a call to be like, hey, on Discord, jump in, tell us what you want to hear. And Nasterin, hope I'm saying that right, one of our users kind of threw out an idea, and we're gonna not only run with it, we're gonna give them credit for it. So
yeah,
why don't you tell us about what we've got going on here?
So the challenge, if you will, is to build an incursion force for matched play. So that's 501 to 1,000 points. I'm gonna say 750, I think. Just because that's a number that I like. It's it's a start collecting box and a couple units maybe.
Sure.
However that works out. But to build that is both narratively reflective of its faction, but also has an eye on competitive viability. So not necessarily a top tier list, but one that makes sense for the fluff without just spamming one unit that's really good and cheap.
Okay.
So on top of that, though, we also need to be able to explain why and how it would be good for a newer player and where they could go from there. Expanding into a further faction, developing it into a full, whether it's 1,000 points or 2,000 point grand tournament army.
Okay. All right. And so where the challenge piece comes in is we had talked about, giving ourselves kind of assignments or challenges to kind of stretch ourselves. So we're taking this idea and we're going to issue each other the faction that we have to do for next episode. So so I'm going to challenge Nate to come up with this narrative informed, as competitive as possible, with primary influence being narratively reflective of its army, but competitive if possible, also like affordable, doable for a new player. And I'm going to say that the faction that I would like to see you come up with a roster for is World Eaters.
World Eaters. Interesting. We're getting specific there.
Yes. Okay. I want to see you make a corn marine list, so to speak.
Okay.
I want to see what you do with that.
Okay. All right. In that case, I think since we have chaos covered and you've already got a Space Marine army, I think I'm gonna have to say that I would like to see what you can come up with for a Tyranid list.
Ooh, making me work. Yeah. All right. So do you want any particular hive fleet, or just Tyranid in general?
Any hive fleet's fine. Just mono Tyranids, no Gene Stealer cults, no Brood Brothers.
All right. Alrighty. And we're looking at 750 points.
750. Yep.
All right. And it's match play. All right. Yep. Well, we got this. So there is the Nasterin if I'm saying that right, incursion challenge.
Yeah.
For episode, this will be for episode 11.
Yes.
So we're going to come with these lists next time, and we're going to talk about the choices we made, why we did it, and also how you'll be able to affordably build those armies from existing kits and things like that. Just what's the most cost-effective way of taking that idea and putting it on the table.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, we can bring we can say that episode 10 is in the bag. We can bring it to a close. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, go check out that Goonhammer interview. I know like Nate said, it came out in July, but it just started making the rounds on Facebook recently. If you get a chance, it's just really neat to see kind of one of their authors talking frankly about stuff.
Yeah.
It's very, 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 very cool. Check out the big FAQ update. The game changed. The game changed. So and I hope you enjoyed us talking about our hobby projects. Is there anything you want to add, Nate?
No, just thanks for listening, everybody, and go ahead and check us out on Discord. Check out the links that we have here in the description, so you can see the Goonhammer article. We'll link to the FAQ page as well, just to make it easy on you. And other than that,
and Artist Opus.
And Artist Opus, yes.
We'll have some links to that. Check them out. Oh my God.
Yep, absolutely. So, and we're not sponsored by them, to make it clear.
No,
that's just
not at all. No, just this is purely just like I was given their product as a gift. I had been watching their videos, and doing it made me a believer in the method.
Yeah. And other than that, I think we can call it good for episode 10. So I'm Nate.
I'm Lucas.
And we will see you next time.
All right. See you guys. Stay safe.